I'm concerned that small business can't continue in a country where we are teaching our kids to be risk averse.
It's certainly very difficult, or you get the type of entrepreneurs who are delusional, who think that it's easy. We all know who David Hogg is, I believe.
Yeah.
And, he was complaining on Twitter the other day how difficult it was. He tried to set up an LLC. And boy, it was so difficult. And why does the government make it so hard?
Oh, I hate these guys. I mean, really, welcome to the party, David.
Well, I know. And so, in a sense, it's almost a good thing. It's almost like we should have a training program where anybody who's leaning towards socialism is required to start a small business just so they can see how difficult it is. But certainly an aversion to risk, more consolidation of power that takes away the opportunity to innovate, and all of the barriers that the government has put up to make it more difficult to not only start a small business, but to hire your first employee and to allow a small business owner to succeed. It is not a good thing for economic freedom, which is one of the reasons why people come here from all over the world to try to start that business and live the American dream.
So when the Fed is raising the interest rates to try to control inflation, the reason why this led to an economic boom in the 80s is because at the same time, the government said, forget all this regulation. Just go out and start a business, right? Without that part of the Reagan plan, raising interest rates while piling new regulation on, that's really a killer, isn't it?
Yeah, if you think about the Fed's options here and what they're trying to do in terms of slowing down the economy, given the backdrop that we have of this messed up labor market and supply chain, the only way you're really getting a slower economy, in my opinion, is if small businesses and to some extent big businesses, just stop hiring altogether. And I think the small businesses, since they've had such a hard time hiring, can't survive, or, other things that make it very difficult for a small business to survive. So the well-capitalized big businesses are going to be able to withstand this roller coaster, which benefited them on the front end, and they will coast through, come out the other end okay. And the small businesses that have been beaten up, have been closed, didn't get the relief funds, and, haven't been able to take advantage of that free debt because they're smaller in scale, are really the ones that are going to suffer from all of this. Once again, Glenn, once again.
So if I read this one more time, my head will pop. I keep reading that the economy is, people are spending money like there's no tomorrow, because the average American just has so much money in their bank account. I know that's not true. Common sense will tell you that's not true. Can you please put this to bed?
So the average, and we've talked about before, average is not necessarily the median. It's often dragged up by the wealthy at the top end. But the average American is in better shape going into this potential recession or stagflation or whatever it is that we're about to face and kind of in the middle of, than they have been in other recessions. The personal saving rate is around, I think, 6.3% as of the end of March, which was the last number that came out. Now, that is worse than where we were in 2019 and 2020 going in, to the pandemic decisions, but it's not sort of horrible on a historic level. We had people pay down a lot of their credit card debt with the relief funds and whatnot, since they were staying home during the pandemic. Now that's starting to creep back up again. So today they are in better shape, but the trajectory, particularly with the inflation, as we know, is eating away at that. So I would imagine that the personal saving rate will continue to decline. We will continue to see balances increase on their credit cards. And at some point, the consumer won't have that strength in their balance sheet and probably will also be making decisions to just punt certain expenditures because their core expenditures of living every single day have gone through the roof.
So we had some questions come in from the audience, and I want to go over a couple of them. Stephen Mary wrote in. You can write in, by the way, glennbeck.com/question. I keep hearing about food shortages. Some say that famine is coming. My wife and I keep arguing back and forth. She says this is really the rest of the world and not us. Yes, food will be more expensive because of inflation, but we won't have shortages. Which one of us is right?
So probably splitting that down the middle. Certainly there is a ginormous crisis across the globe. We heard that clip that you played from the fantastic Samantha Power, who doesn't seem to care that potentially, 40 to 65% of the world could be food insecure or, face starvation because, we don't have enough fertilizer. Certainly we are in a better position in the United States, but it depends on things going the right way. I mean, we've seen that we had, a bout of avian flu that we had to contend with. It depends on crop yields. It depends on our government not just doing stupid things. I mean, we're seeing them pulling, feed out of, of the farm in order to put it into gasoline so that they don't have to drill for more oil. I mean, they don't make the best decisions. So I wouldn't say that there isn't a possibility that we're going to have issues here, because I think there is that possibility. It just probably isn't as stark as it is in the rest of the world. That being said, nobody's ever been upset for being too prepared. So be prepared for that. Worst case scenario.
Ron in New York wrote, I think my job is secure, but so did my grandfather or my great-grandfather during the Great Depression. How do we know what's coming? What is the difference and how do we prepare? Is it smart for me to buy a house at this point?
So, again, this is not financial advice, just some food for thought for you. It really depends on your personal financial situation. If you're somebody who's still sort of living paycheck to paycheck or building up your reserves, we don't know what is coming down the pike. There are a lot of issues. The big thing right now geopolitically is, are these stupid statements from the Biden administration going to pull us into some sort of a nuclear war? At that point, all bets are off. If we're just looking at sort of the inflation picture and the recession, I think the one benefit that we do have is that we have so few people in the labor market. Now, granted, it may get many people off the sidelines as they see their 401ks shrinking and have to deal with more inflation. But if you have a job that you are secure in, you are probably in a better position. But it's always good, again, to kind of think through what are your second and third options. What could you do if that worst case scenario comes about? And then, again, look at sort of the risk reward on the home front situation. We are underbuilt as a nation in terms of homes, and that is long-term probably going to support housing prices, but it doesn't mean there isn't going to be some variability in the meantime, especially with the increase in mortgage rates. So I would just spend a lot of time doing the little pros and cons and putting that plan together for your plan B and plan C, and wish you a ton of success.
I remember my parents, again, small business, in the 70s. It was a nightmare because it was a lot like this. Is it what do you think is coming? Is it like the 1970s and it just stays like this? I mean, nobody knows. You know what I mean? No, Americans have no benchmark.
Certainty?
Yeah, but no benchmark to go back and say it will be like this. We've never seen this.
No, there are just a number of factors that are all coming together. And as I said, I think that geopolitical wild card is the biggest wild card right now. Assuming that we can get that piece under control, because as I said, if that goes off the rails, all bets are off here. I think the likelihood is that we see a recession, but because of the way the recession has come about and some of the other, weird things that are happening in the economy, I think at least in the United States, it's probably a shallower recession than we have seen, in previous periods. Not to say that won't cause real pain for people. It will. There will be people probably who lose their jobs. Small businesses will end up closing. But I think that it will be shorter in duration, than it otherwise would have been if we didn't have some of these other structural issues going on at the same time. That's fingers crossed. But there are a number of factors here. The Fed, between raising rates and shrinking their balance sheet, the geopolitical issues, and some of the other kind of issues that we're contending with. That's just sort of a best guess right now. But we've got to stay on top of this real time because things could change really quickly.
Jen in Texas, welcome to the Glenn Beck program.
Glenn, thank you for taking my call. My question is, just recently, within the last 30 days or so, my husband and I completely paid off our mortgage.
Wow.
Was this a dumb thing to do? Because now we're now debt free now, and that's a wonderful thing. But now we miss out on that tax advantage.
So, I have to tell you, being debt-free is probably the best thing you could ever do. But I hear this question, Carol, from so many people. A, I don't get the tax advantage. And B, if we go into real inflation, doesn't that help me pay down a debt? I had use of dollars that are worth a lot more. I mean, they play this game. Can you answer this?
Yeah, so it really depends on how sophisticated you are financially and how on top of things you are. The reality is that for most Americans, you're not going, oh well, on a real interest rate basis, this is a negative interest rate on my house, and I'm really glad I have this capital to do these other things. I never think it's a bad thing to get rid of your debt because that's just money that's going out the window. And unless you have some other great investment that is replacing that same kind of return, and right now, I'm just not sure where you're getting that. We're having that the stock market is in turmoil. You certainly aren't getting that in your bank accounts. So, now you have it in that asset. You don't have to worry about it. You're not putting that, extra money out each month. And then on the tax benefit side, I'm not a tax accountant, but they've changed a lot of the rules. You're not getting that much of a benefit the same way that you used to. They put a lot of caps around these things. So, certainly talk to your tax accountant. But, from my perspective, for just kind of the average person who's trying to do the right thing, getting out of debt is a phenomenal move. And again, unless you've got some other amazing investment that is going to return you more than what it is you're paying on your debt, net you've won.
Thank you so much, Jen. I appreciate it. That is the hard thing I think, for people to figure out or to really understand how it's not that prices are going up. It's that your dollar is losing value. And that causes people to raise prices because their dollar doesn't go as far to buy all of the things that they need to buy, right?
Yeah, if you have a business, you have all of your vendors who are, have higher wages, higher cost of inputs. So that means whatever it is that they're selling to you is higher in costs. You're contending with higher wages and higher operating costs, and you put all of those together, and all of a sudden your profit margins, which in most industries, aren't that big. Sometimes they're in the single digits, starts to erode. And so you say, well, either I have to pass this on to the consumer, or in some cases they shrink the product that they're offering, called shrinkflation. The pizza that you get that used to be huge, all of a sudden kind of looks like it's half the size, or they end up going out of business. There are only so many different levers that can be pulled, and that's how it ends up seeping through the economy, and it's why it ends up impacting all of us and being a permanent tax.
Carol Roth, she is the author of The War on Small Business. You can ask her anything that you want. You can follow her on her website at carolroth.com or Carol J. S. Roth on Twitter. But you can ask any questions, and we'll have her on again to answer questions at glennbeck.com/question. glennbeck.com/question. Carol, thank you so much. We'll talk to you again.
Always a pleasure. Have a great week.
God bless.